expedite this relationship while improving our relationship with, here we got a joint defense operation with the United States and Canada versus a guy who knows what's on his mind and what he might next do, Kim Jong-un. And he's sucking up to Kim Jong-un, and he's at war with Prime Minister Carney. To me, that's a little bit alarming. Canada, a lot of people don't realize, is involved in Arctic surveillance for our defenses. Because of their geography, they're providing critical radar and sensor coverage. So incoming missiles or any other threat from the air, they're the first line of alarm to let us know that there might be incoming. There's a multi-billion-dollar upgrade to the Arctic radar networks, the surveillance, the technology, multi-billion, and threat detection capabilities that's been invested just recently. And, of course, Canada is a NATO nation. Okay, the trade. Billions of dollars in goods and services crossing the U.S.-Canadian border. Much of what is going on now may violate the Canada-U.S.-Mexico trade agreement. Well, they call it actually the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement now. USMCA. They have initials for everything today just to confuse us. The area that I'm most familiar with as a longtime reporter in Detroit, I've been gone a while, but I'm still cognizant of what's happening, is the supply chain, especially with regard to the automotive industry, where, as we have discussed here before, it's just a bridge. It's the Ambassador Bridge and now the Gordie Howe Bridge. It's also a tunnel. But these trucks don't go in the tunnel, they take the bridges. Back and forth, back and forth. It's like going from Detroit to Sterling Heights, a suburb of Detroit, and back. Detroit and Windsor and back. A part could be manufactured in one country, and then assembled in the other. It's a seamless process between the two countries. It is an economic ecosystem that exists in the region. Especially, as I said, when it comes to the automotive industry. The supply chains are fully cross-border and mutually reliant. So, why? Oh, and by the way, in case you hadn't heard, today the president has said that he might unilaterally rename Lake Ontario Lake America. Okay. Does this have any force of law internationally? I think changing the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America hasn't taken hold outside the confines of the administration and supporters of the administration. I get that. And I get that he's like trolling Mexico and he's trolling Canada. These are our two closest, obviously, allies, Mexico and Canada. I cannot figure out why we are doing this. Now, there may be some trade disparities. Well, there's trade disparities with lots of nations. Look, when you look at the trade disparity with China, I touched on this very briefly yesterday. Yeah, more US dollars flow into China. They're getting financial benefit that we're not getting it's a trade deficit, or at least in terms of the money's exchange. In the aggregate, they come out ahead. But wait a minute. It's not as if it's not a quid pro quo. We get goods that we order from Amazon at a fraction of the price of what it would have cost to purchase if they were manufactured in the United States. Now, I know we want to improve manufacturing in the United States, but I'm just suggesting that you're getting what you're paying for. That's why so many US dollars are going into China, because the American consumer wants inexpensive goods. And the inexpensive goods are coming from China. So it's not like there isn't a benefit. You're paying something, but you're getting something in return. Is it absolutely equal? I don't know. I haven't studied it between the United States and Canada. Might there be room for adjustments? Maybe so. But the rhetoric claiming that Canada is terrible is beyond my area of comprehension based on my understanding of the traditional relationship. Is there a reason for this? Is this really about Canada? One of the things that this president has done is that he's created almost on a daily basis another crisis. And is there a reason? Perhaps. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm just wondering, is there some logical explanation? Is he trying to divert attention from something else by raising these issues that weren't there before? At least seemingly they weren't there before. Or, I mean, some people say that he's losing it or lost it. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. But if you look at this from a logical standpoint, well, there is no logic to this. Well, let me rephrase that. Gary sees no logic in it. There may very well be logic in it that I don't see, and that's why I asked today, why is Trump picking a fight with Canada? I'm going to start calling people in the order in which I see them on the stage. We could use a few more people on stage in queue, by the way, and I will start with Alan if he's available, followed by Scott.
Yes, sir. Fortunately, these days, part of the problem is Trump or whatever
Right,
the
and
system.
for those who are uninitiated, Alan runs a small business, and if he's busy, he's dealing with customers, retail.
Well,
if he's not busy, he has time to talk to us. So either way, it's a good thing. If he has time to talk to us, he gets to contribute. If he doesn't, he's making money. So unfortunately today, he's not making money, but fortunately today he has opportunity to speak on the mic.
No, it's not that I didn't make any money. I made earlier. I had a couple of good sales, but that was it. That's the rest of the day. But guess what, Gary? After 26 years, you're not gonna say anything in 6 days. In 6 days, I'm off the hook. Finally, somebody was crazy enough about this place. So all it is, it's legal issue.
Wow.
And then I'm gonna bug you from the corner of my living room, just like 90% of the people on the chat room. Anyway, but you touched the exact same thing. It was crossing my mind for a long time. This kind of stuff is the distraction. When you come to look at it, I mean, Mexican, they don't have no beef with us. Canada don't have. They are just a neighbor, and I guess the good neighborly things is out of the market and nobody cares no more. So, and I think it's mostly the distraction. He throw this thing out to convert the attention from one end to another end and then bring it back when you pay attention to this and then they throw something else. It's, I guess it's a common game in politics. Other than that, I don't see any reason. Every Canadian I talk to, they are very good people. They more or less they have the same situation as us. They got some stuff them not agree with them government, some stuff they are, but the kind of customer out there they are outrageous with the price of tobacco in Canada. So when they come in here for the business, whatever, they stuck up and they go in there and they hoping they don't get the uh, tax on the when they enter to Canada. But all the people I talk to, they just normal people. I mean, good, lovely people, and I was involved with a couple of them for a long time, 6, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. Michelle and Lee, and unfortunately, they are in heaven. Couple of days ago was Michelle's birthday when it popped on their Facebook. It breaks my heart every year, and I don't know why he's coming out of this stuff. I have no idea. Just like in everything else, I was shocked for 2, 3 months after he called ceasefire between when the Iran regime was falling apart because they all got caught with the pants down.
The question though,
Yeah, we go one at a
Donald
time here,
Trump-
buddy. You have to wait your turn. We'll get to you though. Don't worry.
you
Go ahead,
know,
Alan.
why Donald pick up a fight with Canada? Why?
Yeah, we go one at a time
That's
here.
why we're asking that
Go ahead.
question. If you have the answer, hold on to your turn comes in. This room operate a little bit different. We talk one at a time. We don't let other people interrupt anyway. But hopefully it's not serious. Hopefully it's not going to be, conflict between the individual Canadian but I talked to Lee's brother. He's very mad at Trump for many variety of reasons, and that's how it is. So, to be honest with you, I don't have answer why the heck he does that. Maybe Mr. Amir knows. Maybe Scott, or maybe Mr. The last gentleman was trying to do anyway. Back to you, sir. Hope all this stay well.
So for
And-
those who don't know, he's been referring to a couple people from Canada, and one who's deceased, Michelle. But you talk about how Lee's brother in Canada is upset with Trump. I'm curious. Have you had discussions with him about whether? I know it's anecdotal, but whether he feels that this has reset the relationship between our two nations permanently, or whether he sees this as a temporary setback that things will be repaired following the end of this administration.
No, his feeling is a momentary, because they know president it doesn't last forever in United States. They know in the 4 years he's gonna go away, but for the time being, yes,
2 years. 2 years. 2 years.
2 years.
A little over
Yeah,
2
2 years. 2 years he's be gone, and then next person comes in, it changed the whole dynamic of the whole situation. But at the moment, yes, he thinks Trump is damaging the relation between Canada and the United States, and also he's not agree what he does with the international relationship with the allies and so forth and so on. Just the normal thing I hear in this platform from just American or Canadian or people from Europe. Back to you, sir.
So, Alan, you opened up by suggesting that this is a deliberate diversion, and of course, we don't know the answer to this, and I'm not going to, hold you to it. But I'm wondering, in your mind, what do you think is we're being diverted?
Well, right now it's basically derivative from the situation in Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz and Iran and so forth and so on. Because uh, right now the world is there are a lot of ship but paying tremendous amount of money. They go through the strip and it's not as close that they say. Yesterday they said they cleaned up all the all the mines from everywhere. They cleaned all the mines from the strait, and they are ready. Any boat or anything that goes in there, they shoot him if they wants to re-put the mine under the water again. So there are a lot of things he wants to. And then the midterm comes, he probably throw this stuff out, see what the reaction is, the public is, and then what kind of outcome it will come. It's a combination of a whole bunch of things. It's the situation we live today. That's it. We have to keep our mind busy with all this stuff and do do what they do best. And at the end, we come out a loser, just like every time it's happened. The price we pay. That's the bottom line.
Thank you, Alan. Listen, I'm going to mention something since you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz. I do not want to change the topic of the room, but I just want to bring people up to date on something that's very interesting that happened today, and then we'll get back to the topic of Canada. So please do not respond to this comment. I'm just trying to inform people. Today, Oman and Iran announced that they've reached some kind of a tentative agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And that agreement would include the removal of the mines. Today, the President of the United States announced that the United States Navy has removed all the mines from the Strait of Hormuz. So there we go with another contradiction from there. And it could very well be that you're right, Alan, that this so-called fight with Canada is to divert attention from what's going on in the Middle East. And I know that there are those who believe that everything, including what's happening in the Middle East, is an attempt to divert attention from Epstein, the Epstein files. So I don't know the answer to that question, but it's interesting that you think that it is a diversion, and I'm wondering what other people might think. Scott, followed by Amir.
All right. Waiting with bated breath here. Yeah, I don't know, Gary. Does anybody know? I mean, come on. Who knows?
Does anybody know what time it is? Does anybody even care about time? Sorry.
Exactly. I mean, look. Anything I say is going to be speculation, right? Anything any of us say is going to be speculation. But I mean, there's probably a combination of economic and political and Trump's weird mind, strategic reasons. I don't know. He loves tariffs, right? That's his preferred negotiating weapon. That's when he's on his playing field that he feels comfortable on. It's not bilateral. It's him. He's got, at least before the, court decided that, that there'd be, I don't know what the status going forward is on tariff controls, but he likes tariffs, right? And his theory is, I guess, that because Canada depends so heavily on access to a much larger American market, that the threat of severe economic pain is going to force Canada to make all kind of concessions on things like dairy and, I don't know, automobiles or steel or booze or other stuff. I think when Trump sees imbalance, he pounces, right? He thinks that we have a stronger hand. There's probably a domestic political component to it, maybe. I don't know. Trump can present himself as being the guy that defends the American worker and manufacturer against this. Again, it's funny because he's sort of the tough guy and yet victimizer, a victimized person in chief, right? Like, we're always the victim of these unfair foreign trade practices, right? So the American workers and manufacturers and the American people are being taken advantage of. And even though Canada's an ally, They're taking advantage, and he treats things transactionally. And I think also Trump likes to pick fights, right? So picking a fight creates a political narrative that he feels comfortable. I don't know, the American industry versus foreign countries taking advantage of us, even though the actual economics of the whole thing and the relationships are much more complicated than that. Look, some of this is just about dominance, right? Trump likes, Trump personally and politically likes dominance. He thinks that allies should just accommodate to American demands because we have this, from his perspective, I think, this dominant kind of role in power. So I think when a country like Canada just won't fall in line and challenges this, he gets pissed off. He gets frustrated, doesn't know what to do. So I don't know. What I do know, I think what everyone here knows, is that the American and Canadian economies aren't hermetically sealed, right? They're not separate machines. The automotive industry, the steel industry, agricultural industry, energy supply chain, all this stuff moves across the border a lot, right? And so this is a pretty complicated relationship. It's an interdependent relationship, and ultimately this kind of trade war hurts everybody, I think. But so yeah, I don't know, Gary, why. These are some speculative reasons. I have no idea. If Trump negotiated the USMCA anyway and called it like such a great deal, it's such a great deal.
That's a great point that I miss. He
why is Canada
negotiated it.
Yeah, why is Canada suddenly
right?
What now? Why is it so bad now? Why is Canada suddenly? And if Canada's cheating America, didn't he make the deal that allows them to cheat?
Exactly. I had this argument with somebody the other day.
So
they were trying to tell me he was right for renegotiating it, and it makes no sense. No, you're calling the deal you negotiated rigged. It was your thing.
And then again, this just gets back to the power and dominance thing, right? Maybe he just sees a window and sees opportunities. Like, all right, there's a point. There's an availability to put pressure on, so I'll put pressure on. I don't know, Gary. This is, again, I say take everything with a pound of salt because it's all speculative.
Or it's, like you say, a diversion. I don't know. Or it could be like he just likes a fight, to have a fight. Who knows? It's so difficult to determine what the hell is going on here. Yeah, go ahead, Marshall. Marshall, followed by Amir.
Oh, I didn't realize my mic was open. I'm walking around in a neighborhood trying to find the right house. I don't understand why he's picking a fight with Canada. We had a perfectly good thing under NAFTA, and okay, fine, you want to renegotiate it, get the USMCA, but then you trash the thing you created in the first place because you want more punitive responses to America, right? Some of this to me goes back to Trump being an imperial president. He wants our allies to treat us like vassal states of old wood. At least that's the impression I get. I get the impression he would much prefer a client state to vassal state relationship versus what we actually have, which is two allies working together for combined harmony. Right? And I have no idea why he views it the way he views it. As my little brother has said to me more than once, the person who came up with these sanctions, with these tariffs, was economically illiterate. Donald Trump at his heart is not a Republican. He's a 1980s New York-style progressive business Democrat and thinks protectionism is the way to go, and so is far more willing to flirt with protection and imperialism than I think past presidents have been. Even though Bush waged 2 wars, Bush was not an imperial president. But Donald Trump certainly is an imperial president. And I think he views our relationships with people in a client vassal relationship. I have no idea why, but that's the impression I get.
I'd like to hear some people, and I don't know whether this is something you feel comfortable talking about, addressing the issue that I raised about NORAD. It would seem to, and the comparison that I made to how he appears to be sucking up to a guy who has announced that he's our enemy and has announced that he aspires to fire missiles at the United States. And whether he would or he wouldn't is not the point. That's the relationship we have with North Korea. And we have a defense pact relationship where we rely on one another with Canada. And he's making nice with North Korea. And I'm not saying detente is a bad thing, but he's antagonistic toward Canada. I'm sorry, it's not logical, Captain Kirk, you know? And
nobody ever blamed Trump for being logical.
That's true. That's true. And as people say, we knew what we were buying. Some people may have buyer's remorse, but it's not as if he hid who he was. We had 4 years by which to assess him, not just his policies, but his character. And then we came back after he was defeated, and we then elected him again. You know, sometimes you elect people who are unknown quantities, and you're speculating based on how they present themselves, how good a job they're going to do. Not the case with Donald Trump. So, you know, you get what you buy. You get what you pay for, as they say.
Yeah, we get what we deserve in America and not what we need.
I've heard that also said. I know that when Ed Koch, mayor of New York, was defeated by Dinkins, he made the comment, you know, you get what you deserve in an election. That was his point of view as well. Thank you, Marshall. Kind of a little bit of sour grapes, but, you know, it may be true. Amir, followed by Tiger.
Hey, Gary. I promise not to divert away from the topic.
I know, it's tempting, isn't it?
Preparing to me when you mentioned that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I sort of follow what you said. I think you made a point to Epstein files. I definitely think this whole thing, since January 26th that Epstein files were released, I think it was January 26th, and then after that, in February 26th, we had the first attack on Iran, and since then there has been many sort of instances of Trump, you know, his continuous storms in the teacup here and there, which I think for the majority of the time, we should not take any notice of it. I mean, I've said that before. It just allows him to divert attention from Epstein files and also from perhaps from even the personal gains that he had, which was reported by Wall Street Journal in I don't remember when it was, but it was to do with his was it WLF cryptocurrency, which apparently he made $6 billion or whatever. So that kind of conflict of interest and related party stuff, obviously, if you can move away from that by creating these little storms in a teacup, then you're doing quite well. And if you can ultimately blame the security aspect, I mean, if you can change the narrative, I mean, to give a security reason for the loss in midterm, that would be a phenomenal thing to do, you know? I mean, that's brilliant. It sort of completely whitewashes everything else, and the Epstein files and the conflict of interest and all the rest of it. And it also is a good news for the Republican Party, I think, to some extent, because it kind of changes the narrative to the war in Iran, rather than, you know, we chose someone who's a questionable character. So yes, I mean, if they can sell this narrative on the midterm, I think that would be quite a coup. I mean, they're obviously going to lose anyway, but it's quite important to be able to change that narrative. I mean, that's all I really wanted to say. You prompted me, and you said that easy diverting attention. I definitely think it is, and there's been many, many occasions of it. I mean, obviously, there is a serious aspect to the war in Iran, and that's the nuclear stuff. That is one exception to everything else that I think is just that we shouldn't take any notice of. It's just diverting attention. Anyway, that's my view.
I hope that we entered into this war because we are really concerned about that, and it's not a diversion, because that would be criminal in my mind. Thank you, Amir.
The person who follows the January, that's the only relation between the two. But yeah, anyway.
With regard to Epstein, as I've said often on this stage, and it's probably not the best way of expressing it, but I think it's a descriptive way of expressing it without quite crossing the line. I want to know the names of the men who dropped their pants. That's all I want to know. I want to know who they are. I don't care which political party, if they are politicians. We know all that nonsense happened. Nobody is questioning that these women were violated, many of them underage at the time. I don't think anybody's questioning that. What we are questioning is who are the men who participated in that. Obviously, they weren't all engaged in uninvited sexual relations with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. There were guys over there on that island who participated in this debauchery, and there still hasn't been an accounting for that. There may never be a criminal accounting, I get that. But shouldn't there be an accounting in the public sphere? Who was there and what did they do? And you can't say that they don't know because they have the video evidence. So I don't want to look at the videos, but I want to know who's in them. And I'm not saying that all this is a diversion from Epstein, but I'm saying it's entered my mind that it might be. Thank you, Amir. We'll go to Tiger, followed by Alma.
All right, thank you, Gary. I want to say three things about Trump, and it's really not that complicated. The first thing is that we should never overanalyze Trump. From all of his policies in the past, Trump has demonstrated that he's the kind of guy that just throws everything at a problem and see what sticks, and then walk back the pieces that doesn't stick. He's done that in the tariff war, he's done that in the Doge cuts, and he's again doing it in Iran, and he's doing it now to Canada. So that's the first part. The second problem with Trump, not problem, just characteristics that I think we need to understand about Trump, is that he has a fundamentally different view of what alliance means to America than many of his predecessors. And, in some way he's correct, because I think America used to be the kind of power that enforces a order, and countries who are willing to play along with that order actually gets some kind of benefit from working with America. This is basically the framework set up after the Second World War. But what Trump has realized today is that order no longer works. especially not working for American interest in some ways, because the elephant in the room is that the major adversaries are thriving despite that they're unwilling to follow the rules dictated by Americans and not willing to participate fully. I mean, they do participate. Like China benefits enormously from the global order today. You could argue China benefits more than Americans do. And this is partially why, from Trump's understanding, this current global order needs to be, if not dismantled, changed to suit America's interest more. And from his rhetoric towards all the allies in NATO, in Europe, especially Northern Europe, and in Asia, right? He blames these countries for not participating in wars against Iran, for example. And to his mind, America is disproportionately paying for and contributing to the so-called mostly military alliance in NATO and with security frameworks in the Pacific with Japan and Korea, but are not getting the results that when America tries to direct them to a geopolitical end, these countries refuse to follow America's suit. This is, to Trump, very unacceptable because he demands deference and he demands obedience from what Americans used to call allies, but people in China might call them vassal states. But yeah, it's these current relationship viewed by Trump is not balanced and is not working. The third thing that I think we have to realize about Trump's policy is that he's a very mercantilistic president. This is actually something in my past speakings about Trump, I used to praise him about, because I think, it correlates very well with what we call the comprehensive power of a nation, in particular, the industries of a nation. So to Trump's mind, to make America great again, and I agree with this assessment, that America needs to reindustrialize. And to reindustrialize, and to Marshall's point, Trump realizes a degree of protectionism is necessary to drive both capital and factories back into America. And without this, America will find it very hard to compete with its chief adversary in China. But he wins these kind of commercial mercantilistic wars against all countries, whether they are allies or adversaries. But what he found out is that it's much easier to pick on these so-called allies who depend so much on America. If you look at the trade numbers, Canada, I believe, is 70% dependent on exports to America. Not to mention, like similar to Japan, the entire security framework that Canada has needs to be supported by America. So, and he tried the same thing with China, and Russia to some extent, and found that these countries are much harder to bully into shape. Because first of all, China is a very different beast from all the other countries in that regard. But even countries like Russia, who has already been under American sanction and no longer have the kind of trade dependencies with the America-centered West in general, are very difficult to gain leverage over them. Rather, when America is trying to absorb all industrial productivity back into America, it's much easier to exact the kind of offerings and sacrifices from these NATO and Asian allies than to press on a very hard to deal with and combative adversary in China or Russia, and to some extent Iran as well. So I'm afraid this pattern will continue, and especially that we expect Trump is going to be a lame duck president. Probably this pattern will accelerate because the executive power is going to be the major power that he will rely on after the midterm. Thank you.
I would agree 100% with your assessment. To your 70% figure, which is correct, about 70 or maybe 72%, depending on whose figures you're looking at, of Canadian exports are to the United States. But let's not lose sight of the fact that much of what the United States buys from Canada are essential raw materials, energy, specialized components that we do not produce here in the United States, or if we do, not in sufficient quantities. Or they could be minerals that we can't extract domestically, I guess. I haven't really looked into that, but I suspect that's probably part of the equation. So I understand that he views this as a competition, that the Canadian companies are competing with American businesses. But if you really look at it, and I acknowledge my view of it is a little bit biased based on my understanding of the automotive industry. But the Canadian goods are actually foundational building blocks, I guess, for manufacturing in the United States. The primary goods the United States buys from Canada include energy and crude oil and critical minerals. As somebody else previously mentioned, softwood lumber and forestry products. And as I mentioned many times, cross-border auto parts. It's how the ecosystem is right now. Now, if you want to change that, as you suggest, Tiger, you create manufacturing here in the United States. Of course, the problem that we have, and this isn't an issue with Canada because Canada has the Canadian Auto Workers and we have the United Auto Workers, and there's a degree of parity in salaries. It's more with regard to China and other countries, Bangladesh, Vietnam, etc. It's gonna be hard to actually compete, even if you manufacture in the United States, because, well, yeah, we want a balance of trade that favors the United States, but we also believe fundamentally in people having the opportunity to earn a fair working wage. And a fair working wage in the United States is much higher than a fair working wage in Vietnam or Bangladesh or China, I guess. So, you know, there are a lot of factors here. But, you know, getting back to my understanding of the auto industry, Tiger, there was a time when people were proud to have American-built cars. And then we had the Japanese invasion of cars. And the Japanese cars outperformed in many respects the American-built cars. Well, instead of slapping high tariffs on Japanese cars to protect the jobs of the American auto workers, they retooled, and I'm not saying just retooling the factories, they retooled their entire approach to manufacturing. It took time to where the cars built in the United States were on a par with the cars built in Japan, or at least competitively so. And so, if you believe in the free enterprise system, and you believe in competitiveness in that regard, then if you're concerned about the balance of trade with any country, then in as much as you have the opportunity to, now when it comes to resources, they are what they are, but you improve the way you are doing things in order to make it more attractive to the consumer to buy your goods, right? That's how it's supposed to work. In reality, though, the trade balance, yes, is off, but it's a symbiotic relationship that the United States has with Canada. And it's a symbiotic relationship economically that the United States has with China. It's not like we're not getting something out of it. And I think it's very myopic to only consider one aspect of this equation, Tiger, and not step back and look at the whole thing.
Of course, you're right, Gary. Because I said first, right? Strategy and finesse is not Trump's strong suit. He might have a guiding direction, but his implementation often falls short, as in the tariff war and many other things. So I agree with you. But secondly, Gary, I think what you mentioned, there's a much bigger topic here, and I don't want to spend too much time to derail this room. But what you're essentially talking about, accepting free enterprise and competitiveness, that assumption itself is flawed. Because countries don't compete on equal footing, and especially with the modern monetary framework that's centered around the Fed, there's a thing called the Triffin dilemma. The United States has to export money, basically, in exchange for goods and services. And one of the direct results of that is the assets appreciation in the United States, because that kind of money are driven back in the United States mostly into assets, like financial assets. The elevation of the financial assets itself is also a suppressive factor on your factory production, because this is why wages in Asia and in Canada, for that matter, are much lower than what you call a livable wage in the United States. But that's a grander, much bigger topic. Maybe some other day we can revisit.
Well, more so disparity in wages with China and other Asian nations than with Canada, because I think the dollar and the loonie are pretty close to being on a par. I don't know where they stand today. I haven't looked. But there's not much of a fluctuation between the two. So the economies are similar. Let's just put it this way. The standard of living is similar. I'd be happy to look at the exact figures in terms of the average wages in the United States versus Canada. I might just do that before we're done here. But still, there's an interdependency is my argument. And it may not be an exact quid pro quo, but it's not as if the United States doesn't gain from these relationships. And I understand the frustration, but this all started when the multinational corporations, who we view as American corporations, but they're not. They're not beholden to the United States. They're beholden to their stockholders.
That's a pretty good point.
Made strategic decisions.
That's a pretty good point.
They made strategic decisions to offshore a portion of their operations in order to bring costs down. Because we have people here who worked on Wall Street, and they could explain it a lot better than I can, because I don't have an understanding particularly about it. But I do know that basically these companies have to show projected profits, and a steady growth, being profitable is not necessarily enough to satisfy the stockholders. And so they offshore. Even something as relatively minor as the call centers for companies. They offshore them from the United States to India, and then they realized that it would be cheaper to offshore it from India to the Philippines. Now, all those people's jobs are in jeopardy because of AI. It's ever evolving. I get that, but I've reported in the past about how it's cheaper to take fish that's harvested in the United States and send it to China for processing and packaging, and then send it back to the United States, which is a great cost of transportation, and you're probably not getting fresh fish, you're getting frozen fish, but still, it's cheaper to do that than to do the processing here in the United States. Well, these companies are going to do what's best for them, not what's best for the United States. They're not going to say, well, you know, we could save millions of dollars, but and increase our profit margin, but we're an American company, so we're not going to do that. They don't think that way. So there you have it.
You touch on a
It's a world economy, Tiger, right?
I thought you were finished. But a brief response. I think you touched upon a very critical point, because what you described, it's more of the internal dynamics of U.S. politics. In that, first of all, you're right. These countries are symbiosis, right? Because by distributing work in the way it is distributed today, the American companies benefit greatly in their profits numbers. But the problem in America's domestic politics is that not all Americans benefit equally from these dealings. Most of that profits are being ripped away by the capitalists in this country, whereas most workers are not getting their fair share of the benefit. They do get something in their lower, prices when it comes to purchasing the end products, but they're losing the sources of income that used to support them in this country. So this imbalance is actually the populist force that drove Trump into office. The second point that's related to this, but not exactly the same, is that even among the capitalists, there are divergent interests. If your company is a asset-light type of company, which means you don't do too much manufacturing, or your core competitiveness doesn't come from the manufacturing itself, companies like Apple, right? Their competitiveness is the design and the software. Then for them, it's much easier to ship the jobs that actually has to do with industrial output to China and India, to some extent, Vietnam. But if you are the traditional type of enterprises that are asset heavy and are labor heavy, then first of all, your interest is different than the other type of capitalists, like the big tech. And secondly, you are affected disproportionately by these tariffs and other measures. So the divergence in the capitalism itself is also, in some theories, Trump is said to be representing more of the interest of the more traditional asset-heavy type of capitalists, because first of all, he's connected in real estate, and second of all, I think he fits his agenda because he also relies on the populism in the United States to get elected. But I don't want to take too much time, so I'll give the mic back to you.
Yeah, I think that if the president were a great communicator, he might find this an easier road to travel. His intents. Because if he were to explain to the American people in terminology that, look, we need to do this because we need to create and protect American jobs, and he laid out a plan, you might not agree with his strategy, but at least you would know where he's going, and we wouldn't be having a conversation based on the question, why is Trump picking a fight with Canada? We would be saying, is the fight with Canada strategically proper way of getting to that goal? Well, I wouldn't word it that way because there's not enough room in the title to do it. But basically that's what we would be discussing. But he hasn't communicated what you just suggested to anybody. And so we have to be Trump readers, read his mind, try to understand what he's saying. We have to be dog whisperers and horse whisperers, Trump whisperers. People come sometimes to the microphone and explain to us what Trump really means when he says things, because he doesn't really say what he means in a manner which people can comprehend. It's sort of like going to an evangelical revival and somebody stands up and starts talking in tongues, and then somebody else stands up and interprets what that person is saying. We need people to interpret what the president is saying, and he might have good reasons for taking this kind of action against Canada, but instead of explaining to the American people his reasoning, he says that they're horrible people, the Canadians, horrible people, and I might just change the name of the of Lake Ontario to Lake America. I mean, what the hell is that? Thank you, Tiger. We'll go to Alma. I think I need new glasses. I'm having trouble reading the names sometimes. Alma followed by Mons. Alma, you with us? Monset followed by David.
Hey, thanks, Gary. A lot of good points from Tiger today. I appreciate his sensitive analysis. He's spot on. A lot of times he's spot on things. Picking a fight with Canada at this time when we're basically in a fight with the whole world, whether it's Europe with their NATO contributions, whether it's the Middle East with the war in the Middle East, whether it's the on and off trade war with China that Trump started and then he backed off and then he started and then he backed off and he's still threatening to do. And Canada is the last country you want to have a trade war with. We do rely on a lot of things.
Your microphone's open. We don't hear you, Monsef. Now that is weird. I can see that his microphone is open, but we can't hear him.
And you
Still no. Now we do. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Did you hear anything I said?
You're underwater.
Hello?
Try it again.
Oh, shit.
You said the last thing you said is the last country we want to pick a fight with is Canada.
Yeah,
that's the last
because, like I said, a trade war with Canada would hurt U.S. consumers to an extent that Trump doesn't come clean and say, "Hey, we're going to put these tariffs with Canada. We are going to get hurt." The message you get from Trump is that he still does it now when he does his rallies. Is that the United States is getting rich. Crazy rich from these tariffs, which is not something that anyone could prove because we're not getting rich. The country, the Treasury is not bringing in massive amounts of money from tariff. The courts have decided that actually the United States has to reimburse a lot of companies for tariff expenses. So I don't know what he's referring to when he says that the United States is getting richer than before because of his tariff policy. He still says that tariffs is his favorite word in the dictionary. He just said it like 3 days ago in a rally somewhere. Just one example, Gary, like Canada is the leading exporter in the world of potash. It's something that every farmer needs it to grow their crops. The United States is I think we're account for 70-80%, probably 90% of our potash consumption from Canada because of the proximity and because it's needed. Putting higher tariffs on potash, it directly links to the food chain in the United States. Farmers were going to have to endure, higher costs for things like this to make them grow their plants and crops, passing the cost along to U.S. consumers who will find anything from vegetables to meat to whatever more expensive at the store. And that's only happened because, Canada is going to do, whenever you announce that you're going to, put tariffs on any country, they are going to retaliate and they're going to put retaliatory tariffs on you. Guess who the other two countries as the U.S. finds now that Canadian potash is more expensive? guess who the other two countries are the lead in potash producers in the world? Russia and China. So if we don't get our potash from Canada because it's more expensive, are we going to go to Russia and buy our potash from it and make Russia rich? Are we going to bring our potash from the other side of the world, from China, because we have to. We just don't have enough potash. This blows the whole theory of the comparative advantage that people learn in like the first week of economics school, that you do what you're best at, and then it becomes easier aid where you partners, because then you that you're not good at. It also goes with in a time when you actually need what the other countries have for your own survival, your own production, your own chain, your food chain, and your own whatever. You don't start a trade war because they can hit you when it hurts. And in this case, Canada can hurt us when it, like I said, you mentioned earlier, oil. We still import, I don't know how many millions of barrels a day from Canada.
You're under the water again there, buddy. We've lost you. We've lost you. We've lost you. So I'm sorry, Monsef, we lost you. I don't know why your signal is strong and then gets like that. For those who don't know, potash is referring to minerals containing potassium. It's fertilizer, to which he refers when he says potash. And the United States cannot produce enough of it domestically, so we rely on Canada to fill the gap. So if we lose the fertilizer because of a trade war with Canada, I think is Monsef's argument, what does that do to our agriculture industry? I think as we try to analyze the reasons behind the president's strategies, we have to always remember the art of the deal. And I know he didn't write the book, but I mean, the book was about him. And I think we have seen, those of us who know him from his real estate dealings here in New York, and now the rest of us knowing him for his dealings as president of the United States, he's a guy who likes to create leverage by creating, I think, a crisis. And he believes that maybe forces the other side to the negotiating table, not just forcing them to the other side to the negotiating table, but from a position of weakness. And he made it very clear during the campaigns that he believes in disruption. And maybe we didn't all wrap our minds around what that meant. Maybe when he was talking about that, when he's talking about draining the swamp, for example, we know that there is redundancy in services in Washington, and there are places where there could be cuts, and that led to the Doge experiment, which I don't know whether the report card on that is very encouraging or not. But when it comes to diplomacy, the diplomacy that people like Marshall and I feel comfortable with, and probably a lot of you, is, it's not something that occurs overnight. There's a slow evolution to reach a consensus. And this president intentionally uses unpredictability, I guess, maybe, and conflict for sure, to disrupt the status quo. I think he probably believes it gives the United States the upper hand. And maybe one can understand that with regard to relationships with adversaries, although there could be arguments against that. But why allies? And the other thing that we have to, I think, recognize, and his prowess with this group of people is really evident when we look at the win-loss column of people he's endorsed in the midterms. He's lost some, but he's won a lot more than he's lost. I think he's in the 90 percentile of success the last time I checked. He's trying to fulfill his campaign promises to his base. I think his base is very comfortable. Probably, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's more than that, though. I think it's not just. I think it's not just fulfilling promises to the base. I think it's expanding his power base in the party, so that to prove that he can primary you, to prove that even though Paxton's a weaker candidate and probably Texas would not be moved from likely Republican to tossed up by Cook if he had picked Cornyn. But when he does this, right, he shows that he's got the power. But even if he loses the midterm, he can still ruin your political career. And I think that's going to come in handy if and when, and likely when, the Democrats win the midterms and there's investigations. Because then I think he's trying to get Republicans to think twice. Oh my gosh, maybe now is when I, launch my profile in courage and actually join in with and do some oversight. So I think there's some motivated reasoning beyond just the promise to the base. I think that there's some self-protection going on. And that's why I think he's kind of being, not moving to the center, not doing some things you would think he would do if he cared about a different midterm.
Well, fundamentally, and this is a little bit off the top, but since you raised the issue, I think that fundamentally when a politician in general, there are probably exceptions, there are probably a lot of exceptions, but in general, a politician triages what's most important. The first thing is what's most important to him or her. And that has to do with re-election or upward mobility in the political structure or post-office opportunities in the private sector. That is the priority. And I think for many of them, second on the triage list is the party. What's best for the party? I point to Chuck Schumer as a prime example of that and his commentary about how important it is to elect Al Sayed as the U.S. Senator from Michigan, even though many Jews who he pledged to be their protector find his candidacy disquieting, because he has said the priority is the Senate, regaining control of the Senate. The priority is not protecting the Jews, if in fact he would agree with a lot of Jews who feel ill at ease with El Sayed. Not all Jews do, but a lot do. And then the third in the list of triage list, Scott, in my opinion, is what's best for their constituents and the nation. And I think that they've got the list inverted. And I think it takes a lot of character, and you put yourself on the line as McCain's daughter did, and as Fetterman is doing on the other side of the aisle today. He might get primaried out because he's trying to build bridges with the Republicans, and this is unacceptable with many in his power base. And the genesis of all that is exactly what you just described with the President of the United States right now. You're either with me or you're against me, and if you're against me, you're toast. And so, even if there are Republicans who find, as I do, this attitude toward the Canadians to be repulsive, mum's the word. God forbid they stand up and talk about what they really believe. Mum's the word. Do you think I'm on target here with that comment, Scott?
Gary, I think you're generally on target. Like, more reliably than not. Yes, I think you're making some sense here. Not just because we're.
We never bought with that shit.
All right, that's really nice. Thanks for coming onto the stage and disrupting, but you're not on the stage any longer.
Today. Yeah. Lately, what's great about the room's success? This is the measure of the room's success. The more trolls you get, the better you're doing, Gary. I really believe that.
So are you saying that the attacks that I'm receiving on social media right now for simply posting something the president said shows I'm doing the right thing?
Gary, no press is bad press. You know that, Gary. You're a newsman. You know that.
Well, I'll tell you, the last discussion about that has received on my Facebook probably double the normal of number of people reading it. But I'm not in it for the numbers, but it that kind of speaks to the point that you just made. Thank you for that, Scott. I needed to have my head shrunk because of the unrelenting assault on me, and I'm so thin-skinned. I hope none of them are listening as I break down and cry over it. Okay, I'm over that now. David, followed by William.
Hello, Gary.
Hello, David.
What's happening? Yeah, look, this is probably the worst trade deal in American history. It's already being lampooned all over the press. Carney's caught between a rock and a hard place because, he's asking Carney to also diminish the French language over there, a pro-English.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, you did.
Well, he asked. Wait a minute. He asked Carney to do away with French as an official language of Canada.
Yeah, he wanted to sideline the politics behind that with regard to the legacy of the French Quebecians that were around from the very beginning.
Wait a minute. Who the hell is he to tell Carney? Who is he? The hell is he to tell Carney this? This has nothing to do with the United States.
Right. But what I'm saying is it speaks to his immigration policies here, attacking, Latinos and Spanish language. I mean, it's a salvo that he's launched at Carney. And again.
Well, there's some advantages to that, because the next time I watch a hockey game that's emanating from Canada, when they sing the national anthem, I'll know all the words.
Well, there you go.
Because when they sing "Oh Canada," they sing verses in both English and in French, and I don't know what they're saying when they're singing it in French. And so I'm all for it. Come on, Carney, get rid of that. Get rid of the francophones. Let's do it.
Yeah.
For Gary, because I want to enjoy the game, and right from the beginning, it's such a wonder. Their national anthem is a wonderful national anthem. I love their national anthem, but I'd like to be able to understand what they're singing. Come on.
Well, anyway, yeah. So, in the history, obviously, Trump would like to co-opt Canada as the 51st state, and like I said in the room the other day, America's never wanted for expanding itself, irrespective of what the other cultures want. But look, Canada has ways to retaliate. The energy that they provide us, they could black out all the Northeast, even going all the way down to New York by cutting off the energy supplies. Monsif brought up the potash, the fertilizer play. That would really harm our farmers here. But, Trump's also out there trying to weaponize an America First voting bloc, right? And what's real interesting about that is he's dispatched Vance to Maine to help backstop Susan Collins. And Susan Collins is contradicting Trump by saying this trade war is horrible for Maine residents and also for Canada because of how proximity. And Vance is coming in saying, "Hey, we got to be strong on Canada here." So I think there's going to be a lot of blowback voting blowback with regard to this agenda. Canada buys more cars than I think the combined car buying numbers of 3 or 4 of our top trading partners, Japan, China, a few others. So, and not just that, they're also voting with their real estate pocketbooks. They're not buying and they're not renting. They're not coming to our properties here. They're putting their homes on the market in places like Florida.
Right, the winter, what do they call them, the
Snowbirds.
from Canada,
Snowbirds.
the snowbirds. I've read a lot about snowbirds who are not snowbirding any longer.
Yeah, and these are relationships. These are friendships that I've made. I've been to Florida many times in the winter, and these are some of the nicest people, pro-American. They got their foot in both countries. This is just bizarre and nonsensical from every standpoint of America's legacy as a free nation, as a nation that's made tremendous allyship with Canada. And Canada's backstopped our wars, backstopped all of our campaigns, our policies. And let's be clear, Gary. Let's be clear. They want to neuter Canada's sovereignty. They don't want Canada providing trade deals with China, taking away tariffs for their electric cars. So Trump. This is a form of desperation cloaked with some sort of bizarre power play. Thumping our little cousin. It's like when I don't know if you had any older siblings, Gary, but whenever your big brother or your uncle or cousin came along for holidays and you were the low man on the totem pole, it was very easy to get picked on. So, I think there's a lot of that that Trump's doing because we saw that he really couldn't go over to China and tame Xi into some sort of trading deal. I mean, he was there very, very somber.
I heard he got them to change the name of the Great Wall of China to the Great Wall of America. Is that true?
I don't know what that would have cost us to do that, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's.
Well, it costs us sponsorship. Like at the football stadiums are now sponsored, right? So, they cost sponsorship, and the money for the sponsorship went into the coffers of the Chinese government. And so it says, the Great Wall and the Enco Great Wall of China, or something like that.
Well, if we're able to successfully export American football, I know basketball is huge over in China, and there might be a possibility of branding the Great Wall to some other corporate name. But yeah, so Gary, I think this is going to end badly for both sides. I think we're both going to get hurt over this. Talking about the French position again, I believe that France is making a play to sell nuclear subs to Canada, at the expense of our capabilities of doing that. So, there's a lot of other trade that is also weighing in the balance, and they have options. So we're not their last resort. The only thing I will say is on the defense front, Canada's up there against Alaska. Obviously, they control a lot of the North Pole area. So there's a lot of land there that we need to have access to. And if we don't have a good relationship with our friends of the North, that may be curtailed on some level as well going forward. So that's all I got, Gary.
Listen, if I have to pay more for my Timberland coffee, I'm going to be very angry, David. Very angry. I want to thank Larry for correcting me. He sent me a message saying that today the Canadian dollar, the U.S. dollar, is worth $1.38 Canadian. So there is a disparity. I thought there was a parity there. I thought it just fluctuated just a little bit, but that's a significant difference in the value of our dollar compared to their loony William, followed by Linda. And thank you, Larry, for correcting me, and thank you, David, for your comment.
Hey everybody. You talked about what Trump is doing is not making sense, and you used the frame of quid pro quo. Quid pro quo imagines that you're dealing with a win-win situation. And I don't believe Trump has shown that he values win-win. I think Trump's idea of a good deal is win-lose. I win, you lose. That's what I believe in Trump's logic. He sees as a good deal. So he doesn't look at the economics of it. He looks at economics as a zero-sum game instead of a plus, a win-win game, which trade should be, can be, usually is. It's not a question of one side taking advantage of another. It's a question of trading with somebody else. So, that whole frame of reference is, goes along with grifting as a transaction. But, Canada is already restructuring trade. Canada used to trade primarily from the north to the south. Alberta would send their oil south into the United States rather than sending it across the mountain range, even at a low point in the mountain range, to Vancouver to be shipped off to Asia. They've increased their pipeline capacity to ship more out to Asia. And, that's probably just in the early stages because it takes a while to increase the pipeline capacity. And they're increasing their ties with Europe and their trade with Europe. And, I think that's even reflected in, what they recently made an order to buy Saab Gripens, which is a Generation 4 fighter that competes directly with the F-16. And that the F-35 is a 5th generation fighter, and they're buying some of those. But rather than just rely exclusively on the United States for current jet fighter procurement buying, they turn to Sweden. There's even been talk about Canada joining the EU. I've seen that over the course of the last several months, and maybe that's possible because long run, after being betrayed by the United States up and down, they can't be confident that even the United States is going to have to be on good behavior for a long time to restore the trust of former allies. And I think they feel betrayed, and I think it's going to reflect in their buying habits. You talked about snowbirds. I've read about the snowbirds, the people that want to get out of the cold for the wintertime, going to places like Portugal instead of going to Florida, and the tourism is really way down, and one of the things that it's reinforced is rather than Canada trading from the north to the south, which had been their primary pattern because we were great allies, they're trading more with each other. So I think that a lot of structural damage has been done to American trade that will take a long time to correct or reverse. We're still the biggest single consumer market in the world. So we have our own sort of internal buffer against losing some trade, but we also rely upon supply chains from others, and one of them you mentioned was potash, which is a really important fertilizer that's Canada has a lot of, we don't, and we're going to need that for our agriculture. And David mentioned that they can shut off the lights, if this gets pushed far enough, Canada can shut off the lights in the northeastern part of the United States because they provide a lot of electric. So this is not, it will hurt them to lose that, but will it hurt them more? Will it hurt us more? And I don't think they're looking to hurt us, but they are looking to maintain their own sovereignty and not to yield, their sovereignty and their ability to control their own destiny to the United States. I think that's something that they need to fight against from their point of view. And I think looking at things, do you want to have a win-win relationship with Canada or win-lose? Well, I think Trump really does want win-lose. That's about it.
Thank you, William. Linda, followed by Andrew, who will be joining us from north of the border. Linda.
Hi Gary, I've been listening to this room for the last hour, so it's quite crazy. I don't know why Trump keeps attacking Canada, and I don't see how he gains anything by the tariffs with them, like kind of getting involved in the trade war as well, and like just bad mouthing them, and then he was like saying things like he's gonna make them the 51st state, and just going. I don't see how this benefits the United States to create problems with that country when there weren't problems before. As my understanding was, I thought we had a good allyship with them, so I just feel like why make things worse? And I don't get it. I think he's got some mental issues. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it's time to introduce Andrew. Is that not a great national anthem? But soon, Andrew, you may be singing the Star Spangled Banner. Just be prepared.
Yeah, that's not likely to happen. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it.
Did you hear the defiance in his voice? That's really strong rhetoric that you're already hearing from a Canadian, ladies and gentlemen. Canadians are not bombastic. Did you hear that? Andrew's hackles are up. They are up. So just get ready. Get ready. You better fasten your seatbelt because we're heading into some turbulence. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, my hackles are up, but I think more so in the realm of disappointment, sadness, and much of what was spoken earlier by David and William. I didn't hear All Tiger's response to this, but it's absolutely true that this deal that was on the table, the last minute, the rug was pulled out from us.
Although the White House says the rug was pulled out from us, Andrew.
Yeah, because that's that's going to be, we knew that's how it's going to come out. But when you attack a country's cultural state, if you will, I hesitate to use that word, unlike J.D. Vance yesterday, who mentioned it as if it were an accident. Yeah, when you attack a country's cultural institutions, when you attack a country's ability to trade with whomever they want in the world, then you are effectively asking them to give up their sovereignty and become an annexation of the United States. And this is the goal. You don't call somebody the 51st state for going on however long, 18 months or more, without really believing that that's the end goal, is to annex this country, this lovely country. And we have much of what you want in terms of resources, and in many cases, product. Now, what was the reason provided? Well, the first reason was the amount of fentanyl that we were shipping in there in enormous loads, roughly 2% of the entire fentanyl reaching the United States was crossing that wide open border. The next reason, it's hard to remember these things, just like the reasons for invading Iran. It changes as time goes on from one thing to the next to justify these tariffs. And the final reason being what? The air. That's it. Yeah, the air. The smoke that was coming in from Canada. And my heart goes out to the people of Reno, as you well know, that they were, and what's the other place there? Spokane. Much destruction, much misery with these wildfires. But that was the reason, that's the latest reason that these 50% tariffs were put on. But ultimately the reason is the destruction of our ability to manufacture, especially in the auto industry, steel and aluminum. And I was speaking to a friend last night who works for Ford Canada, actually, and they're tooling up for production. They were retooling over the last 24 months or so to produce trucks. And those were omitted, no longer under the reduction from 25% to 15%. That was what was on the table. So the tariffs would still be there. So those were carved out, which was unacceptable. Again, the French thing was unacceptable, and the inability to trade with other entities, that's absolutely unacceptable. And I think Mr. Carney had said it correct in terms of the world is watching this, and we know that this signature that would be affixed is in pencil so that it can be erased at any time. And we have good reason to believe so, because we've seen it elsewhere. We've seen it in our own relationship under the current USMCA, or as we like to call it, CUSMA. We're already in a trading agreement, which you're violating by imposing these tariffs that go against not only the spirit, but the actual letter of the agreement. So we are standing here with our country in a war with the United States economically, but we are showing to the world that we are a reliable trading partner. We stand by our word, and we're open for business. And in fact, in a couple of weeks, investors holding over $1 trillion are coming to Toronto for an investment conference, because we're wide open for investment, and we will welcome anybody who wants to do business with Canada going forward. And we've been put into the position with this free trade arrangement that much of our trade goes south, as was mentioned, but we are now pivoting. And that pivot is not temporary. That is a pivot away from the United States going forward, because we realize that the nature of the United States at this point in time, and perhaps into the future, is not a reliable trading partner. So we will have to seek other reliable trading partners. Is that China? No, not really. But we're not trading in that same degree with China as we would be with other like-minded entities, capital entities, capital markets. So really, it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to hurt both parties. There's nobody wins in a trade war. But again, as I said, I think this is, and I think somebody mentioned a win-win, and this is what we always look for in trading agreements, what we look for in all relationships with other countries is a win-win, and Donald Trump doesn't understand that ethos. So this is where we're at. But we will spend our money one of the things that was going to go up onto the shelves here were much of the liquor that comes out of the United States to Canada. And I fear that even had that happened, many Canadians would still not buy it, just because of the nature of this administration. And so there are efforts now to compensate those businesses and individuals that are going to be negatively affected by these tariffs going forward for the duration of this administration, at least. And so we are at where we're at, and we'll just have to see how it goes. Thanks, Gary.
So, Andrew, you said in the beginning, and I know I made a little light of this all when I introduced you, but I recognize the seriousness, and I know you know that I recognize the seriousness of all this. You said that it is that you believe it's the intent of the United States to really make Canada the 51st state. Do people really believe that this administration would actually attempt that, and that it's not just Donald Trump trolling you?
Well, they just did attempt it. Those were the last minute changes to the agreement to limit our ability, or actually curtail our ability, to trade with other partners. That is an attack on somebody's sovereignty. We're a sovereign nation. We can do business with whom we feel like doing business with. When you attack a country's cultural institutions, like the French language, one of the things that we have here in Canada, as you mentioned during the singing of the national anthem, it's in both French and English. All our packaging is both in French and English. And so these are irritants. They're irritants. Oh, sorry. You have many irritants culturally, but we're not going to attack your culture. You do what you do. That's your country. Your country's your country. But they're not dealing with us as though we're an equal partner. They're dealing with us as an unequal partner. And it should be noted that the trade imbalance between these two countries, between our two countries, only comes down to energy. If you take energy out of the equation, then you have a trade surplus with Canada. So that particular argument is, just ridiculous, because you have a trade surplus in services and production. So, if you just look at the energy, you take a lot of oil out of Alberta. I think it's like 3 million barrels a day. And of course, the electricity that flows down from Ontario, among other things. But mostly the energy, you take that out, then you have a trading surplus with Canada. So that reason is gone. It's moot.
I'm reading from the National Post, just so people understand how spot on Andrew is. And Carney and Mark Wiseman, who was their chief negotiator with the United States, say that the United States introduced last-minute texts designed to constrain Canada's independent trade-seeking authority. Carney rejected the clause as an unacceptable encroachment on Canada's sovereignty, stating they would reduce the country to a subsidiary. So there you go. That's exactly what Andrew is saying. So it's not something that he's just making up out of thin air. Yeah. And obviously, that aspect of the story is well reported in Canada and not nearly as well reported in the United States. Thank you for that, Andrew.
Yeah, and it would make us a vassal state, much like China deals with their trading partners.
Yeah. I mean, we do not have the right to tell you who you can trade with. We do not have the right to tell you that you cannot be a bilingual nation. It's none of our business. And it's disgusting that we have tried, or that this administration has tried. Thank you, Andrew. Tim.
Yes. So I have, there is a journalist, part of the Never Trumpers, that I very much like. His name is Jonah Goldberg from the Dispatch. He said something about Trump that I thought was very accurate. And he said that the way Trump views leaders of other countries with strong authoritarian leaders is that they are the equivalents of crime bosses, the heads of crime boss families, where they are, because they are the heads, they deserve respect, whereas his own allies and friends, they are beneath him and they don't show him enough respect. That's why he lashes out towards Denmark, Canada. That's why he poses a picture yesterday with him and Kim Jong-un. That's why when he was in a meeting with Xi Jinping before, he called him a great leader, he's a strong leader, because he also wants other people to acknowledge him as equal to them. He doesn't use that kind of language when he talks to allies. He's doing the opposite, in fact. That's what I had to say.
That's a very interesting observation, and that speaks maybe to the psychology of the President of the United States, his thought process. And I can't analyze that, but obviously others have, including the
I
author.
am 110% in agreement with this, but I think I've made this point on the stage before. I am 110% in agreement with this.
Jonah Goldberg, he says that it's because Trump grew up in New York before, around crime families and everything. So he's basically adopted this view of the world. That's why I came here to say it, because it should be repeated, because I think it's the most accurate description of who he is and how he operates.
Yeah,
Well,
Goldberg's not alone in this. I've heard other folks make that same analysis. Like I said, I think I've said it here, probably hearing it other places. I think that is one of the best explanations of why he is so. I mean, what that hermeneutical device is it makes a lot of sense as to why he's deferential to the to Xi and to Putin, and yet disrespectful to people that should be allies, right? I mean, look at how Tony Soprano treats the underlings versus how he treats the bosses over in Queens, right? He's in Jersey, they're in Queens, they run their end of the shop, right? There's a different power relation.
So, it's interesting that, and I'm going to expand, because it's near the end anyway, a little bit on what Tam had to say. And it pivots slightly from the topic, because it's not just about Canada, but I just want to point out that he's exactly right, that it's not, that Canada is just the current victim of all of this, picking on allies. Look what's going on with the Koreas. He is openly criticizing the president of South Korea because South Korea said, to use his terms, no thanks, I think was the words he used, to assisting the United States with the denuclearization of Iran. The United States should not shoulder the financial and military burden of protecting South Korea. But he prioritized his personal rapport and public displays of deference with Kim Jong-un. He treats Kim Jong-un with great respect. He says they get along very well. It's like the alliances with allies are transactional, and the alliances with adversaries, traditional adversaries, are influenced by flattery.
Sorry to interrupt.
Well, you're up. You're up next, Steve, so hold on. You don't have to interrupt.
Okay, cool. No bother.
Okay. So thank you, Tam, and thank you, Scott, and Steve, you're up.
Thank you. So just on what you were just saying there regarding North Korea. So on one hand, America kind of supports Ukraine. On the other hand, they don't. But at the same time, they support North Korea, who is actively supporting Russia against Ukraine. I think when it comes to where Trump is going with this, an awful lot of this is where he thinks his businesses and his children and his friends are going to be able to get assistance and dominate once his presidency is over. Argentina's another example, North Korea, what he's doing with Ukraine, etc. It seems to me that it's far less about what is right for America or how he feels about the traditional allies of America, and more who he feels is going to be able to support, influence, and offer better opportunities to his children, his businesses, his friends, and that, for me, that's why he's willing to sell his traditional allies, or America's traditional allies, and throw them under the bus, because all of these countries that have strict regulations are going to be more difficult for his people, his children, his businesses, etc., to make money through. Countries like Russia, Argentina, countries like that, Venezuela, now that they've done what they've done, are going to be countries where these people can move into, take over industry, and make billions of dollars in the next 10, 20 years. In all honesty, that's how I think he is thinking. I don't think this has anything to do with what's best for America in any way, shape, or form.
Well, that may be true. Or it may be incidental that they use their positions to make money while he is president of the United States. That may be true as well. But to your point, if you look at this, and I'm looking at this 100% through AI generated response to something that I just made an inquiry, Genesis. And you could take it with whatever grain of salt you might because of the source. But they source their information, by the way. The Trump family has generated the most foreign revenue from the Middle East, specifically the UAE and Saudi Arabia. This is according to the Middle East Institute. The financial footprint spans both of Donald Trump's presidencies, with massive multi-billion-dollar spikes recorded in recent disclosures across cryptocurrency, private equity, and real estate. And that, once again, is quoting the Middle East Institute. So does that jive with what you just said, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. I probably should have mentioned the Middle East as well, because again, he has thrown multiple countries under the bus, whilst maintaining alliances with countries that, when you look at the traditional relationship with America, it's very questionable. But if you dig a little bit below that surface and you look at the traditional relationships with where he's taken his businesses and where his friends and partners have taken their business relationships, it begins to paint an awfully different picture of what his actual motivation might be. And again, just to go back to where I closed with what I said last time, I really don't think this is about what's best for America from his perspective. I think it's what's financially best for him, his children, his businesses, and the people who he believes are supporting him.
Thank you, Steve. We'll go to Hanson. And by the way, several people we've invited up to the stage after they've raised their hands and they haven't made it to the stage. It's not because we haven't invited you. I don't know why they haven't made it into the stage. So please, if you've tried and you haven't made it, it's not because we've ignored you. Hanson.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
I'm good, but getting better.
Great. That's good to hear. I'll make it short. So I think I just came in to title. I think Trump is right to pick a fight with Canada. It's been it is late, but still it's better late than never. So Canada has been putting up this trade barrier with U.S. for a long time. I just want to take one example, which is the dairy industry. I think the tariff is something like 100% or 200% or maybe even higher. And what's more egregious is basically it's not just the tariff, it's the trade barrier, internal trade barrier, that they have a license that basically limit the production of their, well, not only this trade barrier is erected against U.S., but also they erected this barrier for entry for their own citizens, and so they have this basically a management institution that is akin to the central plan economy. They have the committee to determine the production, the amount of production of dairy products, milk, and all that, and they have a license, a fixed amount of license in the name of guaranteeing the production of milk, or they guarantee the stability of milk, price of milk, and they basically there's a license that is sold on the market. Well, I would say kind of akin to gray market. That if you want to be a vendor, you have to purchase those licenses on top of the equipment and cows and all. So basically, it's a completely closed industry for everybody. So I think this is great for picking a fight to bring down the barrier is great for everybody.
So what I don't understand about your argument, if you don't mind me interjecting and asking you.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, I agree that the tariff on dairy products is excessive in the aggregate, because it's not just dairy products at a certain percentage. It varies, but it's 200% on the aggregate. So that doesn't sound too good. But let me ask the question. Let me finish by asking the question before you respond. So what I don't understand is, if you think that this is a trade barrier tossed up by Canada, and it's about time, better late than never, that the United States does something about it. These dairy tariff quotas were part of the United States-Mexico-Canadian agreement that replaced NAFTA. And that was negotiated by and signed by Donald Trump. So why are we blaming Canada for something that the United States government agreed to? And then now we're treating Canada in the manner that we are because we agreed to something that we shouldn't have in the first place.
Well, there's a renewed clause in the tariff, NAFTA treaty, and so renewing, the people can adjust the treaty, and there were actually the effort to modify the treaty specifically in this issue, and then I actually brought to I think. Not a judge, but the adjudication institution. Sorry.
An arbitrator.
Arbitrator. The arbitration in the agency, and so basically, the U.S. raised the issue, and then Canada modified the entry, give the quota to U.S. But the thing is, they played the trick. Basically, these licenses were ostensibly distributed to the more dairy entries, but they were distributed to the supermarkets and entries of Canadian origin, and so U.S. producers got nothing. They just basically play the game, but not only the U.S. were played, but New Zealand were too. But New Zealand lodged another complaint, and then actually.
Okay, hold on. I don't want to get too far afield because it's 6:57, and I gotta pull the plug on this in just a couple of minutes. But here's a part of what you're saying, again, that I'm having a little difficulty in understanding. Last week, both the United States and Canada announced that they had an agreement and they were going to sign it. So it was resolved, maybe not to the total satisfaction of the president, but they announced that they had an agreement. Then at the last second, at least according to Ottawa, the United States said, wait a minute, we're going to make this last minute change, even though we announced that we've reached an agreement. It had not been formally signed, of course. And that is, we're going to prohibit you from trading with other partners. And so, I mean, why did they agree to something one day and 24 hours later pull the plug on it? Again, isn't this, if it wasn't a good deal, a failing of our negotiations and our assessment of what we've negotiated before we agree to something? And now we're waging an economic war with Canada because we don't like what we just negotiated with them?
Well, I'm not sure about the details. We can look into the details.
I'm not sure about them either, so don't feel bad.
Okay, so yeah, all right. Then, I mean, if you're interested, we can open a room and we can read the treaties line by line. So I would be interested.
Yeah, it just seems to me they had an agreement. We know they had an agreement one day, and then the next day suddenly they didn't have an agreement because the United States changed the terms of the agreement, and you're suggesting maybe that they changed the terms of the agreement because it wasn't a good agreement. Well, why did they agree to
Well,
it?
I don't know the details, right? So whether who changed mine, whether there is a complete agreement, we don't know.
Well, both countries announced there was. Both countries announced there was. So if both countries announced there was, we have to presume, I think, that there was. They both said so. There was no contention between the two parties. So I think there's more to this. I'm not arguing your point that the dairy industry in the United States views the tariffs as onerous. I would too if I was in the dairy industry. But what about our government negotiators? We negotiate something and we don't stand by what we negotiate. And that's to which Andrew was referring. Sorry, Michelle, I can't get to you. I'm out of time. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday at 5 o'clock New York time. So until 5 o'clock New York time tomorrow, for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
always do a thorough process of thoughts and investigative.
We need everybody to praise the country. Everybody has to make up their own mind, but she just annoys me too much by her constant, incessant interrupting. Like she treats every room like as if it were her own. That's annoying. I don't know. You know, you probably use her, for example, to piss off some people like Caleb sometimes, but yeah, it's just annoying.
You know, it's
Hi everyone.
hey, what's up, bro? Hey, what's up? Yeah, no, I don't use her. Just the thing is, she has this opinion about anti-Zionists, which is
over and fucking them up the ass as they're over speculating.
I have no evidence of why.
Okay, name, is it near to that?
That you don't want to participate. Oh, you can't.
Very much because my daughter's hurting. Okay? So it comes from another place. So you may not have an issue with it or other cultures using it, but I do. What works for you may not work for me. It's disrespectful and it's out of line. And there's a person in this room who used it toward me, and it was very disrespectful.
Damn, who's that?
Oh, no. We're not going to do that, President.